Hey everyone, Bear here. By now you may know that I'm really into just doing these totally unannounced, super spontaneous lives, particularly when I find myself having a lot of content that I want to get out to you and more than I can actually write at once. So I'm hopping on to talk a little bit about the full moon in Leo that's happening tomorrow morning, depending on where you are in the world. Where I am, that'll be 10:28 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I talked a little bit about it with the folks at the live chat last night, and I'll be posting the replay for members and patrons, so you can check that on the website or over on Patreon if you want to. But I wanted to kind of have one condensed thing that's just talking about the new moon, and to share a little bit that's kind of not quite horoscopes, but to talk about how this might be showing up based on rising signs. So I've got a couple of notes here. I'm going to run down and try to keep it somewhat short, and then I'll repost over on YouTube, update the captions and all that kind of stuff over the course of the weekend here. So the new moon coming up, it's exact at 10:28 a.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow, Sunday the 5th. This new moon, I'm sure you've heard a lot of folks talk about it. I talked about it with Chris and Austin on the Astrology Podcast for the February forecast, about the fact that this particular full moon in Leo is like the last real lunation that is getting all up in the business of the Saturn-Uranus square. And it's also this interesting midpoint between the last set of eclipses and the next set of eclipses. So we can kind of think about it like in the course of a whole year of lunar cycles, we're in like a quarter moon phase in terms of the eclipses. It's kind of like a full moonish type phase between the eclipses. So the full moon is more intense than it might otherwise feel. Like not every single new and full moon is a really big deal unless it's active in your chart. Fixed sign folks, you're like, all of these have been big deals, and they have been. So a couple of things that I found really interesting, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about like the dignity and terms and stuff in the fortnightly lunacy report that I'll post here shortly. But a couple of things that I was thinking about is the fact that because this new moon takes place exactly in the middle of these signs, they're in the 12th part, or the dodecamoria, that corresponds to the opposite sign. So the sun is in the Leo part of Aquarius, the Leo 12th part of Aquarius, and the moon is in the Aquarius 12th part of Leo. So there's this almost kind of the sun and the moon are seeing eye to eye in a way that you wouldn't expect given the opposition between them. But the sun, of course, is in a sign of their detriment. The moon is in a sign that's peregrine. The moon's in a part of Leo that responds to Saturn in three different ways, right? So there's a lot of Saturnian quality to this. In the chart that I pulled up, and I talked about this in the live chat, so you can check this in the replay. In the chart that I used to talk about this lunation, I'm looking at a Taurus rising, and I'm thinking about that in the context of like what Venus has to say in the way that values and relationships, I think, have really been central to the question of the Saturn-Uranus square, at least in what I've observed. Wherever we're being challenged / invited to adapt, the Taurus part of our charts, and to do so in a way that gives us longevity and endurance and durability and integrity, the Aquarius part of our charts, it all comes down to relationship. Whether we're talking about the relationships that we have between ourselves and our environment, the relationships between ourselves and other people, or the relationship that we have with ourself. And I know that some folks kind of question the idea of a relationship with self, that it sort of objectifies us. But I think about it in the sense that, you know, in the duality, non-duality sense of like what I is there even that I am talking about. But I also think about it in the sense that we have a relationship with that baby in a picture that is definitely not our adult self. And that relationship that we have with us, the continuity of ourselves, our integrity, I think those things are up. Both how we communicate about those things, but mostly how we are relating to the long-term consequences and impact of making the choices that we're making, adapting in the ways that we're adapting. And so it's really going to vary depending on what your rising sign is. Rather than go through and do like 12 full horoscopes on top of all the other stuff, I'm kind of clustering these based on quadruplicity. So I'm going to put all the cardinal signs together. I'm going to put all the fixed signs together. I'm going to put all the mutable signs together. And I hope this makes sense and is useful for y'all. So if you have a cardinal rising sign, if you're Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn rising, then I'm really thinking about this lunation for you in terms of creating and sharing wealth with your community. So because of your rising sign, this lunation is activating the fixed signs, and it's activating your succedent houses, so your 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th houses. And here I'm going to use the words, the 2nd house is your resources, probably familiar with that, but I'm going to say, what about the 2nd house is like materialization, manifestation, actualization, the real material of what it is we're doing, where the 5th house is celebration, the 8th house is cooperation, and the 11th house is preparation. And I'm thinking there about the way that the 11th house is hopes and dreams, anticipations for the future. And so this Leo full moon, think back to whatever's going on with the Aquarius New Moon, and then think back to those eclipses that were happening in October and November. This full moon should be one where you see what I'm going to call like the tetrad of cooperation. These succedent houses for you being really operative. If you caught the Aquarius New Moon fortnightly lunacy that I published, then I've been talking about the new moon, and this full moon is kind of like the exit exam and then the results. This Leo full moon is the results coming in. So like, what has been going on for you? What types of changes? How have you been adapting in the way that you have relationships with your stuff, relationships with celebration, with pleasure, with joy, with the erotic? I mean erotic in the Audre Lorde sense of the word. How are you tapping into the power of the erotic? With the 8th house, how are you building a relationship with investing with your community? And with the 11th house, what's your relationship to the future, to consequence, to longevity? If you have Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius rising, then I'm thinking about this lunation, this Leo full moon being about being and showing up in the world. How are you being in the world? How are you showing up in the world? Emerson Furwolf says my Aquarius ascendant versus my Leo moon on the descendant. Yeah, right? So like if you also add in some of your personal stuff, right? How is this lunation picking up your own chart? Which angles there? We'll get to this one here for the fixed sign rising folks. Being and showing up in the world. How are you being and showing up in your body in the 1st house? How are you being and showing up in your foundation, in place? How do you take up space? What place do you have in the world? How do you relate to your sense of belonging, right? Belonging in a place. Obviously, 7th house and 10th house are going to bring in relationship and action. And so I'm kind of thinking about this as like the tetrad of embodiment. How are you being in the way that you have been navigating what's been changing, right? This like, depending on exactly which one of these rising signs you have, Uranus has been shaking up a pivot, a foundational, fundamental part of your chart. And so whether that adaptation, whether you've been asked to adapt in the way that you are in your body, whether you're being asked to adapt the way that you navigate space and home and security, or your relationships or your role out there in the world, that's really, really monumental change. And then of course Saturn's like squaring that and insisting that you do that in a way that has some ability to become permanent, or as permanent as possible, to do it in a way that's enduring. Now, if you Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces rising, my little note here says like making and pursuing meaning. So I'm thinking about the fact that it's your 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th houses. I'm going to maybe say this is the tetrad of purpose, or the tetrad of meaning making. I don't have a good pithy thing for that. So if you have a pithy thing for that, you can go ahead and share that. But I'm thinking that this full moon, if you have a mutable rising sign, it's activating the parts of your chart that are about what is familiar. Who do you have a sense of like community with? And in that sense, when I talk about the 3rd house, yes, it's place. Yes, it's your local immediate environment, including the trees and the plants and animals that you have a relationship with in your immediate environment. It's your siblings. I think it's your chosen family, your cousins. Who do you have a sense of like fraternity with? I wish we had like a more gender neutral word that just meant like, who do you feel? I mean, the one I've been trying on is like sun siblings, right? We're all children of the sun, children of the earth. So who makes you feel like y'all are siblings from the same mother, whether that mother is earth or the sun or existence itself, what have you? I hope that makes sense. So we're talking about the 3rd house. The word I like for that is stewardship. If we think about the 3rd house, traditionally is like the house of the goddess, has to do with ritual, And I think stewardship is a good way of tapping into ritualizing a relationship that is familial and familiar with our immediate environment. All right, so like, how do you show up? Comrades is a great way. I like that. Yeah, right. So like, who are your comrades? The 6th house is service, the 9th house is spirituality, and the 12th house, I'm using the word seclusion. There's other ways that we could approach this, but I think the 12th house is this place that recognizes liminality. It recognizes the importance of rest. It recognizes the importance of the dark moon. It's where rest really is a radical act. And we could go into that, but this full moon for y'all, I think, is really, really asking you to take a look at and honor and also celebrate, how far you have come, what have you accomplished in terms of adapting the way that you act as a steward in service to your own spiritual beliefs, whatever that means. Like, what does it mean to be a spiritual comrade to the people you call community? Or another way of saying that is, what does it mean for you to show up like a future ancestor today? And I know that's something I talk about all the time because I am a Native person, and so that's always a thing. But I think this particular lunation, in the context going back to 2020 when the Saturn-Uranus square started, taking all of the Scorpio Taurus eclipses into the equation, this really is the last lunation where we're going to be deeply personally in it. And then like after this point, we're going to be kind of cruising away, looking in the rear view mirror at these things. I have a couple other notes here that I want to share with you for the cardinal risings. Like, the little note that I wrote was like, overburdening yourself with, so the first things I said, these are like the good side, right? The good juicy side. If you did the homework assignment and you graduated or whatever, if you passed the test, which is a little more binary thinking than I'd like, but it's handy and I think you get the idea. If you pass the test and what I said before, or if you're in a like really volitional place where you're engaging this energy with a lot of agency. If on the other hand, you've been having the experience of like, this is not an agency full, this is not self-imposed, this is not stuff I'm choosing, I feel like this is happening at me, coming from the external, or the more negative or challenging sides, and we might be talking for the cardinal signs about like overburdening yourself with debt and really coming to reckon with the consequences of taking on too much there, dealing with own harsh self-critique, or self-imposed limits on the expression of your creativity or sexuality or erotic urges, reckoning with the contraction in cooperation or community, or abuses in power, whether it's ones you've experienced or ones that you have perpetrated. It's things that are less within our control, or like, yeah, those are things that would be experiences that are less within our control or feel external, financial losses or like diminished libido. Those things, if that is what's happening, then I think the antidote, I hesitate to use that word, but the places where we can find a bit of support, friendly support, would be actually over there in Gemini. So looking at Mars, where can we be more precise with our words, where can we bring in heat and cutting in a way that's beneficial and healing? That's the challenge there. Because it's Mars, it's challenging, but because that Mars is trine to one side of the opposition and sextile the other, that's the point of Thales, Mars provides a little, surprisingly, a little opportunity for integration or a way of working through some of the negative, harsh expressions of this. For the fixed signs, it's like restriction and rigidity, instability, denying your own weird genius, like being too locked up in trying to predict the future with your adaptations rather than being in the spot of emergence and adaptation in the moment. What else did I write here? Presenting a false front in relationships or evading intimacy or connection. So these might be some of the like less fun results that are coming in. And if those are those things, again, if you're experiencing that you're having a negative experience with what happens in relationships when you go in trying to present a perfect image and then somebody meets the real you behind that perfect image and it isn't fun anymore because there wasn't enough honesty, there wasn't enough transparency, then Mars coming in with more clarity and precision, using words Wielding words, yes, words can be sharp, words can be weaponized, but if we think about other types of Mars cutting through the bullshit, Mars cutting through confusion, bringing in more of that, I think is the antidote to some of those things. And for the mutable risings, I said, introducing a new process into established practice, or like overburdening yourself with work at the expense of your soul, right? Grind culture, that might be one thing that you could potentially be experiencing, like negative results coming into. Or what happens if you're adhering to the letter of the law over the spirit of the law? Those are some of the potential negative consequences or negative results that might be coming in. That's the short, quick take. It's Saturn's hour, so I'm gonna say that Saturn means keep it short, keep it brief. I could go on, but there's plenty of other things to talk about. If you have any questions, feel free to like reply here or shoot me a DM. You can shoot me an email if you want to. And like I said, I'll be uploading the replay of the February's live chat from last night, and I'll also be posting the Sky Vibe serial, Fortnightly Lunacy, and the Better Thans and B-sides for this week over the course of the rest of the day. So you can look out for those. And if you aren't already signed up for my newsletter, then you can do that in the links in the bio. Y'all know how that is. Thank you, everybody who popped into the live today, for dropping in spontaneously. Lovely to see your avatars and names and faces popping up down there. And I hope that I get to see you again, maybe at the next live chat. Have a wonderful, happy, and very blessed, solemn Saturn's Day.